Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good evening. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next hour here on Radio Hamra. Not taking any calls because we have a special guest with us tonight who I'll introduce to you now. You probably know him already. He doesn't need an introduction, but I'll give it to you anyway. Payam Banifaz is an actor, writer, and comedian residing in Los Angeles. You maybe have seen him on Instagram at pbani with his hilarious videos. He was born in Tehran, and his family immigrated to the U.S. when he was 8 years old. He's a classically trained actor who studied with Howard Fine, Tom Todoroff, Doug Warhit, and Lewis Smith, among many others. He is a veteran alumni and performer at the Upright Citizens Brigade, and he's been on many, many shows, including 3 seasons as a recurring guest star on Shameless, Perry Mason, Lethal Weapon, Bosch, Silicon Valley, Veep, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Mom, and many others, as well as several unaired network pilots. Some of his feature film work includes Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, Hail Caesar, and also Everything... Everywhere, all at once, which just came out, and you got to hear his voice right there. Payam, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
And when I posted today that I would have you on the show, so many people responded because they've been seeing your videos on Instagram, and it actually reminds me, we were talking before we came on the air, for a lot of times we see people like, oh, they just blew up out of nowhere. But as I was reading there, you've been doing the work for many years now as an actor and a comedian.
Yeah, I started when I started about like 15 years ago, just kind of getting into it and trying to work my way up. But the Instagram videos, I started doing that during the pandemic because I was just bored and anxious at home, and I had no other real creative outlet. I do a lot of live shows, and then I do a lot of filming and stuff like that. And during the pandemic, I couldn't do any of that. Yeah. So I just kind of started doing these videos because I wanted to show a lot of my non-Iranian friends a little bit about my culture and have them laugh with me about it, because I'm constantly complaining that there's really not enough representation of Iranians in film and TV or Middle East in general.
Right.
So I was like, instead of complaining about it, maybe I could be part of that change. But I didn't really think anyone's gonna I didn't think anyone's gonna watch them, to be honest, just except my friends. And it kind of just sort of went from people just started watching and sharing it. And
I remember, that's like, I actually remember probably early in the pandemic seeing some of your videos, and then they were just and they got funnier, I feel like, too. I'm sure you kind of, maybe something we could talk about too, I feel like, as artists, finding your voice and then trusting that more and more becomes part of the process. But I remember seeing your videos, and they do make light of Persian culture and the Persian experience, but also humanizes it in that way, like you're saying. So it's like not just obviously like the kind of stereotypes of being a terrorist or being something that we see in the media. Right. It's like, we have families, we have moms and dads and uncles that people probably can relate to too. I think there's often overlap between cultures and like the things that our family members do. But I think you do a great job of bringing light to some pretty important topics. Even you have one where it's like, if my Persian dad was a therapist, so as a therapist, I kind of laughed at that one, probably a little bit too hard. And I was like, this guy might take my job. But it's like, it does point to like how we look at things like feelings and emotions, and often, or don't look at feelings and emotions because it's not okay to do that. So I thought that's pretty cool that you do seem to shine a light on certain things that it's not just it's like laugh, but then also maybe we realize we can change some things in our culture as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I started seeing most of these little issues we have in our culture as I got older. I wasn't conscious of it, but as I got older and just started seeing how mental health is being treated, let's say, in American culture, Western culture, and just comparing it to how we look at it, I feel like a lot of our people in our culture suffer very needlessly. I think and I see this in a lot of older cultures, not just us, Asian cultures and African cultures, where it's like everything is about sort of holding yourself together. Everything is about sort of just kind of always showing the world that you're okay. And sometimes we're not okay. and we have every right to feel our feelings and sort of not have to feel ashamed from them. I love my dad, but growing up, if I was crying, my dad would always say, he's like, son, men don't cry. And it really wasn't until later on that I was just like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, you know? Like, so I was able to let that go. But that's like a big theme that I grew up with. Not just me, a lot of my friends too. And a lot of them weren't even Iranian, but the same thing. And it was always from their dads, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting one, like the male emotional experience, especially in most cultures, even American culture, but
Absolutely,
you see it in the Middle Eastern culture. And something you said that's interesting is like when we grow up, we kind of just assume that's life. Like whatever, however your parents are, you know, I've worked with families, no matter how abusive or toxic it was, they assume this is life. And then you get older and you kind of now can have some perspective of like, wait, it didn't have to be that way, or maybe some of those things I was taught weren't the way or the right way. And so I think it's not until you get a little bit older that you can even recognize the nuance or recognize some of those things that you were seeing. And you also, being an immigrant, had to kind of bridge two cultures. I'm sure you had to see it from multiple perspectives as well.
Definitely. I mean, when I first came here, I mean, I was young and I was kind of ignorant. I didn't really know what to expect in the U.S. And I actually thought I assumed everybody in America is like white and like blue-eyed and blonde. And where we moved to Canoga Park, north side of Canoga Park, and this was back in '89. And most of my neighbors were Mexican, El Salvadorian, Filipino, Vietnamese, and I had never met people like that before. So luckily, I learned a lot from them about actually how to be an American, and I was able to sort of transition. It wasn't as much as a culture shock because I noticed how much culture we share with. I shared with them. All these people that I named, all these cultures that I named, were all very family oriented, and there was just a lot of things we had in common, so I was able to bond with them quickly. So I got lucky being in that environment.
Yeah, you know, it's actually funny. My family, we moved to Oak Park in 1990, like around right. So in 1989, we moved from a different part of LA. I guess you moved from Iran at that point. You moved, and anyway, so that's interesting. And the cultural experience that you share, I think, is really important because, we talk about Iranian culture. We want to represent that, but then we start to see the overlaps. I think when we stay in our cocoons, we think our culture is so unique, and it always does have its unique aspects. But once we start talking about these things like mental health and men being told not to cry, you see that in so many cultures, and we're thankfully overcoming that. But I think the first step is that we can share that together of like, oh yeah, you went through that too, I went through that, and that itself can be a bonding moment. And what you're doing with your videos, it puts it out there. The Persians are laughing because they can relate exactly to it. But I think a lot of people from different cultures are like, oh yeah, we have something like that, you know, where I'm from too. You know?
I get so happy when I have other people like from different cultures like, yeah, us too. Like, oh, Iraqis were like this too, or like, you know, us Chinese are like this too. Like, and I see that a lot, especially on TikTok too. TikTok is sort of like, it has a more diverse algorithm, so it gets to different types of people. So different types of people see the work easier, I guess. I'm always surprised by sort of that shared experience with cultures that like I guess I realize now you really can't assume anything. It's like we are all so much more similar than we are different all over the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as you know, like mental health, like you brought up before too, that's something that, I would say in America it's a little more accepted, let's say, than Iranian culture, especially more traditional Iranian culture. But we still have a stigma of mental health here in the United States that we're thankfully moving towards reducing, but we have it there. And so like those things you're saying that we're okay all the time, I think so many cultures can relate to that you don't share with people that you have problems. You always say you're okay. You always have to, especially as a man, never cry or never be weak, so to speak, by showing emotions. And so we can, I think more people than we realize can relate to that. And that's a big thing about it. It's like there's always a sense of it's like only me or it's only us. And then when we put it out there, only then can we start to see that, oh, we go through that too, or we know that kind of experience. I think that's really cool that you get that. Yeah, I've heard that TikTok has that, it's a little bit more like you might reach more people.
Yeah, it's a different algorithm. It's based on sort of like, as soon as you post something, the first, let's say, 100 people that comment on it, watch it, share it, they're the ones that technically set the algorithm for that particular video, like how far it goes out, how fast and whatnot. Instagram, I've learned, is more of has more to do with like the time you post and the day you post and stuff like that. And I've only learned that stuff just because from posting, so I had no clue of any of these things before.
I'm sure there's a science to it, yeah.
Definitely.
I'm actually reading a book on, it's so funny, the book I'm reading is called System Error. One of the authors is Iranian, but it's about kind of big tech and some things about that, and some algorithms and things are in there. But anyway,
that's cool.
But yeah, so it's an interesting kind of thing that you expose yourself also to different audiences that way. You know, another common theme in cultures that we see, especially non-American cultures, is going into the arts being frowned upon, you know. So some of the things we say, like, you know, Persians, you can either be doctor, lawyer, engineer, or something like that. You talk to people, Indian, you know, people will say the same thing. Different cultures will say the same thing. So I'm kind of curious about your own experience, and also, as much as you're willing to get into, about your own family and that process of choosing to go into the arts.
It wasn't easy. I tell you that.
Imagine, yeah.
When I first told my dad, I had told my mom before. I told my dad. She was just sort of like the more easier going one.
Yeah.
You know, she was like, okay, you know, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 27 when I was like, that's it. So I actually started a little late, because for a long time I was like, I knew I wanted to do it, but I was just so afraid, and I just felt like there's no way something like that could happen for someone like me. So like I just held off on it for so long until I couldn't sort of lie to myself anymore. I'm like, no, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. And what were you doing before that?
Yeah, I was going to go to law school.
Yeah.
I got my degree. I got my bachelor's in political science, and I was studying for the LSAT when it was just one day where I was just like, I couldn't. And it's so weird when I explain this to you, but it's like I reached a point one day where I was like, I can't go one more day like this. I can't go one more day not admitting to myself that this is what I want to do, and this is what I have to do. Because, you know, nobody gets out of this life alive. So it's like I have, you know. And I told my dad, and he was very, very upset, and he was very, very disappointed. And it took me a very long time to get him on board. He didn't, and he got on board once he started seeing me bringing home money. To be honest, that's kind of like really what it was. But it's like it's not like he was against the arts. He's actually a big fan of like movies and music and whatnot, and he plays the drums himself. Like, but he just was too worried. Like, dude, there's no way you can make this happen like this. And he was like, nobody wants to see an Iranian on TV. Nobody wants to see an Iranian in the movies. Like, you know,
yeah, that's interesting. It's always that you know, it comes from a protective place.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I never took it as anything other than he was just scared.
Yeah.
You know, he would get angry and we would fight, but it was just, I also think maybe he grew to respect me as a man when he saw that, like, no, this is what I wanted to do, and I put my entire heart and soul into it. Yeah. And so I think that helped to, you know, and now he's just so supportive. He's, you know,
that's great.
He's always asking me, you know, what am I up to, and, you know, give me suggestions on stuff. And so but yeah, it was very hard in the beginning.
I can imagine. Yeah, it often is. And I think it's that's like interesting hearing your process with him, that you had to first, you have to even like convince yourself, it seems like, a really like, or get out of your own way, in the sense like you knew that's what you wanted to do, which I think is so fascinating. I work with people in therapy, and sometimes I can recognize there's almost an anxiety about figuring out what their dream is in life, because then they know, once they know, they either have to ignore it, which is going to hurt them, or they know they have to like make a lot of changes to make it happen, and that could be scary too. So I feel like people often don't want to even know what their passion is, as much as on one hand they want it, but there's an anxiety that comes with, if you know, now you got to go do it, or you're going to live the rest of your life knowing you didn't do it and it was there, and that's going to eat away at you too, you know.
I mean, I tell you, that night when I made my decision, I was like sitting on my bed, and like I was just like, I was so incredibly anxious. But I think what happened is the fear of what would happen if I didn't do this was greater than the fear of what would happen if I do try to do it. Yeah. So it's like, I was like, what if I'm like 50 years old and it hits me like I didn't do this thing I always wanted to do, and then I'm going to be miserable. And it's like, I'd rather do it, fail, and move on than not do it and fail. And again, it's like, when you're doing it, you're not thinking of like, oh, I'm being so brave, or you're scared. I was very, very scared and very worried and very scared of failure. And I had no idea what was going to happen. But I just, like I said, I just couldn't go one more day without not at least trying this thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me at least try. Like, I'm not saying I can do it. Let me at least try. Then I tried and I started training. And then I realized, no, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think I actually like hearing you share your story, because I think a lot of people think, oh, you find your passion and then it's just like happily ever after that. And it's not. It's like you're saying, even when you knew, you were like super anxious and scared, but it felt like we pick a lot of paths that are a little bit scary, but you're like, this is like the scary path I want to go on. This is worth risking. And I think what you said about regret is so powerful, because lately I've been, even on my show, but with clients, really recognizing, if we don't think about our own mortality, that look, life ends. You won't have this future to keep doing everything you want to do in life. You either have to do it now or you might not get the chance. And recognizing what are the things you might look back on in life and regret if you didn't do. And I think you're saying for you, that was like, if I never give this a chance, I know I'm going to regret it. And I don't want to live with that regret. And so, you made that decision. You're like, no more reading comprehension and logic games. I got to put the LSAT away and go.
God, this is a nightmare. And I'll be honest, like, I'm not good at really a lot of things. Like, I was never too good in school. I don't think I do good, like, in the sciences to, like, become a doctor. Like, but I realize now, it's like, okay, no, I was good at this one thing. I just kind of never got support in it, and so it wasn't something I could work on when I was young. I always wish my one regret, and I try not to think about this, is that I wish I started much earlier, but then, what can you do? So,
well, I think, it's good to think about that. I think also you sharing this right now, I hope people listening, because, it's the soonest you can do it is now if you haven't done it yet. So if anyone's listening, I hope they'll contemplate some of those things. We'll talk some more after the break. But like I said, I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think people say, oh, you're an actor, comedian. You were like, from day one, that's all you were. It's like, no, you had to go through this path to find that. And then it took a leap at some point. It wasn't just like the path opened up easily in front of you.
Yeah. It was.
We're at a commercial break, but after the break, we're going to continue the conversation with Payam Banifaz. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Again, my guest tonight, actor, comedian Payam Banifaz. And Payam, before the break, we were talking about going into the arts. And as we were saying, many cultures have this, and it could come from a protective place. It comes from image of going into some selected fields like, medicine, engineering. You were pre-law yourself, and going to the arts can be frowned upon, or you went through your own challenges. And I know you wanted to talk more on that, because I think it is really important to encourage people that there aren't just these few career paths. And for me, it's always about people tapping into their gifts, their talents, their abilities, and everyone I think has unique ones, and expressing that in some way. And it's not going to be just in these few boxes. So I wanted to hear your thoughts more on that, or what even advice you have to either parents or individuals who are kind of going through that or thinking about that.
My advice, obviously I understand parents would be apprehensive.
Sure.
I think a little bit of that is just the immigrant mentality. We went through so much to come here.
That's right.
So then now it's all about making it in this country. But the way I think about it is like our families went through I think about my own family. They went through so much to come here, went through hell. So now that I'm here in this free country where there are so many opportunities available for those who want to grasp them and take them, isn't it a shame for me not to take advantage of that?
Yeah.
Instead of just going into something out of fear or out of shame or out of the anxiety of it of whatever career not happening or not having money and stuff. So it's like our families went through so much to come here. We can take advantage of that and do something bigger than we've done. The thing is, us Iranians, specifically, let's say us Iranians, we're right now, let's say, at the very least, in every major city in this country, we are people's doctors, they're lawyers, they're engineers, surgeons and dentists, but so we're part of the social zeitgeist in this country. Why can't we be on film and television too, just like everyone else? And until we do that, we're never going to be fully embedded. And because the sad part is, media has such a grip on the way people look at the world and look at each other, that if we were able to be more on film, television, radio, podcasts, internet, social media, like more people are familiar with the culture. More people are familiar. You're going to hear less, oh, you're Iranian? Oh, does that mean you speak Arabic? You're going to hear less and less of stuff like that because people naturally are going to become educated. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if we sort of take that step. Our generation and the newer generation of Iranians who either came here at a young age like me or were raised here and born here, raised here, we need to take advantage of that. And it's like my biggest thing I would say to parents, and again, I'm not a parent, so I could easily understand if a parent's like, hey, well, you can't tell me how to raise children because you don't have any. But I would say it's like, if your child has a passion, a dream, a talent in that, or even a mild talent in it, and has a drive, please don't stop them. Please let them at least go and fail and at least get that out of their system, at least whether they know that I can't do it, but I tried, or I can do it, I'm going to keep on trying. We are a talented culture, and we also a culture that really loves talent. Like, I remember, like, my dad used to say that in Iran, whenever, like, the painters and poets and artists, like, everyone would say, would refer to him as Honarmand, or like Ostad, or like people had so much respect. So it's like we're a culture that truly admires the arts. Why can't we get more involved in it here now that we have these opportunities here?
Absolutely.
Little by little, things are changing in the industry, and people, even outside of Iranians, they want to see diverse stories told by diverse people. So I think this little by little, our time is coming, and the people out there who want to be a singer, if you want to be an actor, you want to be a writer, I mean, it's a really hard business. It's very, very hard. But so is not fulfilling your potential. Absolutely. I feel like that would even be harder. So I just hope that all my Iranians out there, especially the young folks growing up out here, just like, you have the opportunities here, you have the resources here, and I hope you go for it if you have a passion. I really do.
I think it's well said. And something was interesting. I'm going to go back and maybe come to the things you said at the end there. It was interesting because lots of people say, well, your parents came here and they sacrificed so much, suffered so much to get here, to any kind of immigrant, children of immigrants or people who immigrated at a young age. And there's a sense that, well, because of that, you should play it safe to make sure they feel okay. But I think what you add is that perspective of, well, actually, we're here in this land where there's more opportunity. Why not take advantage, or it would be shame to not take advantage of the diverse opportunities that you possibly could have, which I think is really interesting. And it is tough for immigrants to not have that type of a scarcity mindset. They went through so much, and they just want everything to be okay. So, it's to have some sympathy for those parents too. We can understand where they're coming from. Even you were saying, your parents, your father had good intentions, that he was trying to steer you away from the arts. But I totally agree with you that we want to allow everyone to express themselves and who they are and their own talents. And I think, you said the opportunity is there. It's only if we take it, whoever the artists are. They have to take those opportunities as you've been taking yourself to put yourself out there and make it happen. It wasn't handed to you in any way.
No, I had no resources. I didn't know anyone in the industry. So I had to just sort of literally start from the bottom up. But the more of us that are in the industry, the less the next generation of people trying to get into the industry will have to start from the ground up. Like there will be resources for people. Again, I just feel like we are a talented culture of people, and it's a shame not to pursue that. I totally understand that our families went through like hell to come here, so it's like you got to play it safe, and I get that. I totally do. But also, it's like I can't help but keep going back to the idea that you only live once, and it's like any decision made from fear, I question that decision. Now, when there is no, my parents, they left Iran out of fear because it was during the war. And they were sick of, we were sick of just sitting in our cellar and just listening to bombs going off. And so that decision was made out of fear. But also, it was made out of like hope too. It's like, we're going to go here and we're going to make a life here. So I feel like, Well,
I think, we can differentiate possibly those fear where it's genuinely life and death or huge circumstances fear versus the fear of taking a chance or a risk or putting yourself out there, which maybe we can consider that more like an anxiety than like a fear for life. So yeah, I mean, you're living in Iran and there's bombs going off around you. That's a very real fear. If the fear of what if I do this and I don't make it is a different type of a fear, right? So I think you're right. We don't want to make decisions based on that.
Well, I meant the fear. It wasn't the fear really was like, because my mom was like, we got to get out of here. We got to go. We have to leave. And my dad was like, yeah, I get that, but are we really going to start new in an entire different country, entire different culture? So that's really the fear I was talking about. And that's a very legitimate fear. And again, I don't know if I have the strength to do all that.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know if I could be as tough as my parents were. I really don't. So again, I totally understand when people want to make decisions to sort of make their parents happy because of how much they sacrificed.
Yeah.
But also it's like, I know it sounds selfish, but you kind of got to live your life too. Like, because when your parents are gone, you're going to be left with the decisions you made for either yourself or them.
Yeah.
And I will say that parents, the thing they want to see most is their children happy. And if you're happy doing something you love, even if you're not making millions of dollars a year, I don't know. I think that's still a pretty
I totally agree.
A good exchange.
Yeah, and going back to your saying, I moved 3 miles from my old place, and that was like stressful enough, like moving to a different country. I don't even know what that'd be like. So, but like living that life, that's something we have in our culture, unfortunately, is like we can have too much dependency. At times we're too interconnected. So family being close is beautiful, but we can be too close where we get in each other's way more than we are just, enhancing each other's lives. And so, yeah, that's something I see a lot with people in therapy, of just realizing they're living their life for their parents. So, of course we want to respect them and we want to live a life that we feel good about and they feel good about. But unfortunately, you see too much where it's like, I have to live this life because it's what my parents want, not making the decisions ourselves. And that's what I think what you were saying before of letting your children try things from a young age. They might not even pursue that thing. But what I think is sadly lost often is we tell kids not to listen to that voice within themselves that's guiding them to what they want to do, what they're good at. Say, no, you can't do that. You have to do this. And then so they start to just only externally lead their life. It's like, what do others want me to do? What are others telling me is the right thing to do, rather than listening inward of, okay, what is that voice inside of me saying I like to do, or, is my passion and all of that. So I hope parents, sometimes they almost get afraid, like, well, what if they do this and they go into that? They might, and maybe they'll be good at it and that could be great. Or at least they'll try different things and maybe they'll build a skill but go into something else completely. But giving them that space to explore it, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'm really in no position to comment about like what parents should do. I've never had a kid, but I just saw what it did for me. And if somebody at a younger age would have sort of inspired me and made it okay to do those things, I would have gotten into it earlier. And but again, everything happens for a reason. I do believe that, and so, but I get it. It's got to be scary to be a parent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I work with a lot of parents, and I always try to be mindful. It's so easy to say, oh, do this with your kids, do that with your kids, but actually having your kids and worrying about so many things, it's much easier said than done.
I'm sure.
I'm wondering for you, what were the motivations or inspirations like that kind of made you really pursue this more? Who do you think of as influences growing up? Or I'm sure there's so many, but what made you think of this? I want to do that. What do you remember seeing?
I used to watch like these compilation videos in Iran when I was a little boy of just like clips of other films put together. And I just remember I was just so inspired by movies, and I don't think I understood what they really were.
Sure.
To me, it seemed like, oh wow, these are grown adults that are literally sort of playing make-believe in front of this screen, and that I found that so intriguing, and I would fantasize about it ever since I was a little boy. And the thing is, though, the fantasies never went away. I was still suddenly, I was like 25, 26. I'm like, man, I'm still thinking about this the way I used to. It's never leaving me.
Yeah.
That's when I started realizing, and I was so passionate about it. Like, I love movies and I loved acting and like at least watching, and like I loved Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando and Denzel Washington and and then Mike Myers, and I would watch a lot of Mel Brooks films, and like these are all the things that kind of inspired me, and I didn't really know that they were inspiring me.
Yeah.
Because I thought these fantasies were like normal. Everybody has them. It wasn't until I got a little older I was like, oh no, I think this is something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
I gotta at least give it a shot.
All kids are very use their imagination, but often people who become artists might have like really been good at going into that world. Do you remember doing that as a kid? Like going
Definitely.
into
My mom says that anytime you go out somewhere, let's say you go watch a movie or anything, you would immediately come home and start drawing about it and like making your Legos and like about it. And she saw that like I was very inspired by especially movies and the TV shows.
Interesting.
But I would just sort of reenact film scenes with my toys, and then like the dialogue of the films and that was sort of my little. That's how I was sort of put myself in that world.
Yeah,
with the toys. And
well, it wasn't even, and that's the things like kids don't even like. It wasn't like you knew what you were doing, but you were just so inspired that you were like expressing it in that way, and so she would notice that whatever you saw, you were kind of like, and probably putting your own interpretation and spin on
absolutely.
it too. Yeah. So you're that creative side. I'm doing this book with some friends called The Artist's Way, and it's like a lot about connecting to the inner child and the creativity. And so kids, we see it, and it's very cliche to be like a kid, like all that stuff. But there's a lot of truth that they kind of, like I was saying before, when they follow that intuition, it guides them to the places they need to go. So you would come home and something in you just like, you weren't thinking about it consciously, you were just drawn to acting these things out, which shows of something within you that kind of had that interest or that passion for it.
Absolutely. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
I had no idea what any of it meant. I had no idea that it was I didn't look at it as a calling or anything like that. I was like, this is just fun. But that feeling never left me, even when I was a young adult. And that's when I started realizing, okay,
yeah,
I think something inside is me telling me to do this.
Yeah, what I think is really, like I said, really cool, because I think people seeing you, I always think when people say, oh, so-and-so is like a natural, or they were born to do that, which is some truth. But if you don't work at it and like work on the craft, you're not just like, where you are today is not just because you were born with it. It's what you've done in this 10, 15 years of working on the craft, right, to get there, which maybe we can touch on too as we're going to the commercial break and into our last segment. Again, my guest tonight, actor, comedian Payam Banifaz. We'll be right back. Welcome back again. My guest tonight, actor and comedian Payam Banifaz. And many people, although they're hearing your voice, they might recognize the voice, but especially if they see your face, I think a lot of people will be recognizing, especially from many of the TV credits you have, but also the Instagram videos that we were talking about earlier that are just hilarious. Please check it out if you haven't already. P-Bani on Instagram. Just curious, like how you mentioned it kind of just came about during the pandemic, yourself feeling anxious, couldn't perform in public and things like that, and started making these videos. But yeah, like what kind of led to that inspiration? Was it just something for fun? What did you have in mind? I'm sure you couldn't imagine it was going to blow up the way that it did, or maybe you did, but what was that process like for you?
I didn't think anybody would watch them. I mean, I the thing is, originally I was telling you before we started that I was complaining that there's really no representation of Iranians or even Middle Easterns in general, film, TV, even social media, and I was complaining about it, and a friend of mine basically said, hey, why don't you do make some videos and whatnot, and it really, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I wouldn't have even started. But it was during the pandemic, as you said, I was just sort of bored, had nothing to do. There was no auditions, and then there was no live shows, and then there's no production, and so I just started doing them, and I wanted to just sort of show my friends, who a lot of them are non-Iranian, just sort of kind of like a little bit about the culture and sort of laugh with me with it and just sort of put it out there. And then little by little, people started sharing, and it sort of started picking up. And the Iranian community just showing me an incredible amount of support and kindness. And I didn't expect people to really like look at them or anything. But what most of my inspiration is that like the little funny things I would see my dad and like some of my like family friends' dads and would do, and then sort of comparing that, sort of putting it in perspective in terms of, or the context of what that means or looks like in comparison to American culture. And like just kind of those are the things. I just felt like there was a lot of things that we do in our culture that are funny, that we forget how funny they are, but non-Iranians would be like either, hey, that's funny because we do that too, or that's just funny because it's funny. And a lot of people would reach out to me, and they were very kind. They're like, oh man, how do you know that this is all how all our dads? I was like, I don't know anything. All I know is this is how the people that I'm around behave. So it's like I have no higher understanding of like the behavior of Iranian parents more than anybody else. It was just literally just sort of mimicking certain aspects of my dad, and it's certain aspects of my dad, and I really exaggerate it because my poor dad, the guy's like.
I was going to ask about that. Does he watch the videos?
Yeah, he does. He loves them. He loves them. And I think he understands that I exaggerate greatly. Yeah. And so he doesn't take it personal. He finds it very funny. And I think he likes the fact that I'm doing something that is fun for me, and it kind of and people seem to enjoy it, and then fellow Iranians enjoy it, and it's like any type of positive thing we can get out there is nice, because the media has been sort of just demonized Iranians for over 40-50 years. Anything that's not about uranium enrichment or like whatever I think is welcome by the Iranian community. And again, the level of support they've shown me I'm just flabbergasted.
Well, I'm sure you have gotten a lot of kindness and level of support, but it's because the videos are so good. It's not just like charitable that people are giving you that, because they are really funny. So like I said, so many people, when I mentioned I was having you on, were just like so excited because they've watched your videos, they laugh, and so many of them like, he's always spot on, and so like you said, maybe it's like drawn from your own family, and I'm sure going to like family and friends and seeing different Persian families and things like that. But you do seem to capture a lot of the feelings and the experiences that people have. And like you said, I think that's something so cool about social media, and hopefully it'll be in the larger scale media as well, is that people didn't get to see their stories, like so people would be like, their dad or their moms would do certain things, but they never saw it anywhere. Now you're putting it out there, and they can see it on their phones or laptops or where they're watching, like, oh, like that's me, or that's my experience. And there's something so powerful about people seeing their experience represented, even maybe in an exaggerated form or some kind of way that's made to be funny. But I think people really resonate with that, and they get really excited when they see something that reminds them of their own experience.
That makes me really happy, because like I certainly would have wanted to see stuff like that when I was growing up. But and just to your point, my real goal is to now take to the next level and sort of basically have something like this on in TV or in the movie theaters. I think right now with how streaming is sort of the streaming companies are the biggest platforms, really media platforms for film and television right now, and it's like, and everybody all over the world has access to them for the most part. So I feel like right now is a great time to get a show or a film on, let's say, Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatnot, so like people all over the world can watch it. And I think there is a huge untapped market that the studios haven't really been able, just haven't either willing or just haven't got what they're looking for to sort of put it out there. But that's my ultimate goal, is to have my own show and create content that's like that is about our culture or includes our culture, but that everyone will watch it, everyone will enjoy it.
That's awesome. Well, look, you're saying before about like your friends are telling you it's not out there, so make it. I'm glad you're going to be making it, or you're going to be putting that work in, because I think it's great. A lot of times people say at first it's like, let's say, gay characters. It was like the gay character would just be gay, and that was like the thing, or whatever it is. And so like still Persian, it's like, oh, the Persian character is Persian, and that's like their thing. But then soon we just want to have a Persian family, and they're Persian, but it's more about them being a family and not just about them being Persian, right? So it's like kind of more humanizing in that way. And I think maybe we are getting more ready for that, where it's not just like that's the defining thing about the family or the characters. It's just that's part of who they are, but there's going to be human beings.
And you make a great point. I think up until now, and still going on, often Middle Eastern characters, the fact that they're Middle Eastern is the joke of it. Or the way they talk, or like my friend, or they'll make jokes about camels and whatnot. But my goal is so that the funny thing is not that they're Middle Eastern. The funny thing is that they're funny characters, but they're still Americans. This is about an American family who just happen to be Iranian, or about an American doctor who happens to be an Iranian. And these are the stories that I would love to tell. And already we see that the market is starting to open up for it. It just takes a little vision from the studios and the execs and the streaming networks to just sort of have some vision and sort of take a gamble on something that they don't understand or don't know. And I think it'll do very, very well.
Yeah, and I think
really
you're
do.
right. And that's what people are looking for: diverse stories told by those individuals themselves. So I think, there's been a lot building up to it, and I hope people are ready for it, and I hope people like you will take that step of creating something, and then hopefully we will be seeing it on. We can binge some,
Thank you. That's my ultimate goal. That's my dream, just to be able to do that. Luckily, I'm finally in the position to sort of be able to, work on that. And it's obviously not easy.
Sure.
Development world is very difficult. But luckily, I'm making headway. And again, that's just my ultimate
Good
goal.
for you.
So,
and I think that's why I alluded to it. I think in the first segment, this like quote unquote overnight success feeling that sometimes people can get in different industries, and I could see how for many people they hadn't seen your videos till let's say recently, and they might think, oh, this guy just like blew up out of nowhere. But you've been putting in the work. You were in the Upright Citizens Brigade for how long? Like
I was years? So I was at the Upright Citizens Brigade. For any of your listeners who don't know it, it's improv and comedy theater. That was around for a long time. It was Amy Poehler from Saturday Night Live was one of the founders, and I studied there for a long time, and then I joined the main stage team and performed there for almost 12 years. And it shut down. It's been shut down since the pandemic. But and then before that, I was lucky enough to study with some great acting teachers in LA, and so. Yeah, I've I never really liked this concept of overnight success. I think it's a myth, at least in our business.
I totally agree with you. Yeah,
it takes decades to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
Because by the time for you to have that kind of success, you need to have that work put in, and you can't fake it.
Yeah, for it to last, I think you can go viral, you can have a moment.
Sure,
but to really make something lasting, it has to be something. And that, going back to our earlier conversation, I think the arts are wonderful, and I hope more people will pursue them. And I think the words you shared, I hope will encourage people. I also think what I always ask people is, you need to ask yourself what's driving you, because some people, especially now, I think with social media, you can get famous for doing nothing now, really, right? Not providing much, not sharing much. But I always say, I hope what people will think of it is that you have a gift to share. So it's actually, you want to get famous, not because you want to get the fame and the money or whatever comes with it.
Do something easier.
Well, you want to give, what I'm saying is you want to give something, right?
Definitely.
So I think you want to give, you can have a singer who wants to be famous to get the accolades and the money and all that, or it's someone who wants to sing because they think they have a gift to share to the world. So I hope if you're listening, and you're encouraged, I hope you are by these words, but you recognize it's not that we're saying go into the arts so you can get famous and rich and like have this cool life. It's that, because you have something in you to share with the world, share that gift with the world. And then, those other things might come with it. But I think the intention is hopefully to give rather than to get.
I would say that just from only from my experience, but everyone that I know in this industry that's become successful, if you want to be rich and famous, I say do something else. There are easier ways, perhaps, to be rich and famous in this world. Don't become an actor. Don't become a singer. Don't become a writer. Because these things, sometimes the only thing that will keep you going is your passion, is your love for it. Because when you've heard a million no's and a million doors, slammed in your face, time and time and time again, in those moments when you're sitting by yourself and you're like on your knees, like crying because like you're like, when will this happen for me? The only thing that will keep you going is your love and your passion for it, not the love and passion of being rich and famous.
Right. I think that's such a great point.
That was one thing I had to realize, because I didn't know. I was like, wait, do I want to do this because I want to be rich and famous, because I have maybe like some chip on my shoulder, or is it? Through time I realized no. This is what I love, and I think you got to find the passion in it. I see. The thing is, like, people think, okay, you go to school and become a lawyer, and then you become successful. You go to or school and you become a doctor. Those things still take a lot of passion. Sure. Anyone that you see is super successful in their career, it's from years of passion and work and blood and sweat and tears. But especially in the entertainment industry, yes, please, folks, if you want to be rich and famous, just like, I don't know, go and, I don't know, record yourself farting in a grocery store and go viral. I mean, there is...
Someone's going to go do that right now.
Yeah,
and I hope
yeah.
they'll give credit to Payam, please, if you do that. But you're right. I think it's like, it's a craft, it's work. And if you're doing it just... for me, success to be measured by what we give, not what you get. And so you should give something to the world. And you might become rich and famous, but that shouldn't be your intention. And that's not going to drive you. And like you said, if that's what you're going for, you're going to quickly get discouraged because it's going to take a long time to even scratch the surface of any kind of field. I am looking at the time. We do have to wrap up. I appreciate, I think you're hilarious. And I think I managed to make you not that funny for the last hour somehow because we just talked about serious things. But please check out Payam in so many TV shows, movies. Of course, you're already probably following him on Instagram. But if not, check out his videos, P. Bani on Instagram. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Another big thanks to Payam for joining me tonight, Payam Banifaz, and a big thank you to Amir here in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful night.